I don't care how good of an actress Dakota Johnson is, her destruction of one of my favorite literary characters is unforgivable. Hi, I'm Anne and welcome back to my channel. So yesterday, I got around to finally watching Netflix's new Persuasion movie. In the last few weeks, since I saw the original trailer, I have been trying to avoid spoilers, so as of this review, I haven't watched any other reviews, and I actually finished rereading the book for the second time about 5 minutes before I started the movie because I wanted the content of the book to be fresh in my mind. Now, for those who don't know of Persuasion by Jane Austen, or this is their first exposure of it to the film, because those who have read the book will have a very different reaction to the movie than those who haven't and know nothing about the book. But basically, Persuasion tells of a second chance romance. 8 years before, Anne Elliot was in love with Captain Wentworth, but because he was a penniless military man, everyone advised her against marrying him, and so she broke off the engagement. And now fast forward 8 years and she meets him again, and it is a second chance romance. That's basically what it's about. It's also the last book that Austen wrote, even though it wasn't the last book that was published. Austen wrote it when she was older, and a lot of her books that were published after were actually written when she was much younger. So it has much more of a mature, dark focus than a lot of Jane Austen's books. However, just from the trailer, I could tell this film would take a much more lighter, almost humorous tone, but the problem is they kept the same plot, so it really didn't jive at all. And I assume it's because of the successfulness of Emma, which is a great film. I highly recommend it because I enjoyed that adaptation. But the problem is Emma is a much lighter book than Persuasion. But even though I really didn't like the trailer, I wanted to give the movie a chance, so I watched it. And yeah, the movie was just as bad as I was dreading. The cinematography is beautiful. There are some beautiful shots. I also liked quite a few of the costumes, even though there are some questionable fashion choices, like Dakota Johnson having her hair down, even though she's a 27-year-old woman in the movie, which would not be done during the era. And then also like some hats. I'm like, where are these choices coming from? But for the most part, I liked the way the film looked. I also liked a lot of the casting choices. I think everyone was a good actor. Let's be honest, there's a lot of things I could critique about this film. I could critique the forced feminist messaging, even though the plot of the movie literally goes against all the feminist messaging. The random quotes they have, like women empowerment, but yeah, I'm gonna go around and turn around and just marry men and do exactly what society expects me to. So great feminist message, I guess. I could also critique the very random language used in the movie, like the word narcissist, which wasn't commonly used in psychology until the late 1800s. I could critique all the vast changes to characters that I thought were changes for the worst. For example, the elimination of my personal favorite character, Mrs. Smith, who brings out the true character of Mr. Elliot, and also the vast change of Mr. Elliot's character. I could also complain about the choice. I don't know why Regency Films decide to cast Black and Asian actors in like rural England while ignoring the vastly stratified and slightly racist culture of the Regency era and just ignoring all the true history and just inserting Black people into being characters that they wouldn't be historically with no explanation, and ignoring all the hardships that actual Black people, actual Asian people went through in England during that time. Let's just pretend that didn't exist. I could also complain about the breaking of the fourth wall and the random narration that Anne Elliot does throughout the entire film, which drove me insane. I could complain about the forced humor in an otherwise rather serious film. Instead, in this video, I want to critique my number one complaint about this movie and the fatal flaw I believe in the film, and that is the complete destruction of Anne Elliot. So in order to understand just how dirty Netflix did to Anne Elliot, first it's important to understand who Anne was in the book. So I could go through a long list of Anne's qualities from the book. She's kind, she's considerate, she's very socially aware of situations. She is there to listen to people even though they honestly probably don't deserve her. She has great advice even though a lot of people aren't willing to listen to her advice. She is also very closed in on herself. herself. She's not willing to express her feelings so much because she's afraid of hurting other people, and she's very intelligent. She understands nuances of situations. There are so many compliments I can give to Anne Elliot because she is a incredibly sacrificial, uplifting individual, and one that I am inspired to be more like in my daily life. So let's get to the Anne Elliot of this film, and I'm going to categorize the main 3 aspects of Anne Elliot's character and how they changed it from the original. I'm going to call it the 3 A's. Altruism, aplomb, and acceptance. Altruism is defined as the belief in or practice of disinterested or selfless concern for the well-being of others. And this Anne Elliot has no altruism. When we are introduced to Anne Elliot in the very first scene, she's complaining about her family. She calls her sister Mary a narcissist. She complains about her sister Elizabeth and her father. She makes fun of them and is sarcastic in dealing with them. The Anne from the original book was not sarcastic at all. She wasn't snarky. She wasn't unkind to her family like this Anne is. I'm not saying that it's wrong to create a character who is all those things, but that is not Anne from the original. She also has a bad habit of correcting people when I personally think they are not doing negative behavior. For example, Mr. Elliot says something along the lines of Anne is a captivating creature. And her first response isn't, oh, wow, you think so highly of me to think me captivating. No, she's like, don't call me creature. I'm a woman. And then he asks, well, what's wrong with calling you a creature? You know, seems like a good question. And she's like, I'll tell you later. What? Like, what a horrible human being. Like, the unkindness from her, the complete disregard that, yeah, maybe, you know, she was offended by him calling her a creature. And that's fine. But also then to snap at him like that in such a cruel way is just so uncalled for. So any gentleness on Anne's behavior in the movie is gone. The next one is aplomb, and that is defined as self-confidence or assurance, especially when in a demanding situation. The best way I would define this as something similar to poise or elegance or self-assurity, so it combines the 2 terms. And Anne in the original is very self-assured. She knows what to do in bad situations. She's also very good at talking to people. However, Anne lacks any sort of social awareness. She's very socially awkward. There's one point where she's having breakfast with her sister and brother-in-law and nephews, and she puts jam on her face. And then, of course, Mr. Wentworth walks in, because of course he does. And she's, you know, looks like a complete mess. That is not something that, you know, the Anne from the book would do. She was much more elegant, much more poised. Also, she just starts talking about like a octopus eating her face in front of this, I believe she's like the mother of Mr. Elliot or someone wealthy. The Anne in the original would not, 1, draw attention to herself. She was very much more stand back in the corner and observe situations. And 2, make such a socially awkward blunder, and they make it all, like fun, light, quirky, relatable, that she falls on her face when she's walking, or like she decides to just go in the ocean and start swimming in her clothes. None of those things are things that the Anne from the book would do. And finally, and I think the biggest thing that bugged me, the biggest change in her character, is her pining after Wentworth. The Anne in the original book, she still loved Wentworth. She never stopped loving him. However, that didn't mean that her life was consumed by pining after him. She still continued on her life. She still enjoyed the company of others. She still was kind and considerate to others. But this one, I think the first or second scene, shows Anne drinking alcohol and crying in a bathtub. Because Anne Elliot was a drunken crier. Anne Elliot is a drunk in this movie. We see several times throughout the movie her consuming vast quantities of alcohol. We also see the after effects. She's at breakfast with her family and she clearly has a horrible hangover. Anne Elliot is a drunkard in this version. I'm fine. And she's completely defined by her pining for Wentworth. And the message throughout the movie is that basically a woman don't need no man to be happy. Except clearly Anne Elliot does. So when your protagonist is demonstrating one thing and the movie is clearly presenting the opposite thing, it doesn't go together, okay? It doesn't go together. It doesn't make any sense. Anne Elliot is completely defined by her love for Wentworth. She's not her own person. She's not confident outside of her obsession. She's a drunk who complains about everyone, who shows quite a few narcissistic behaviors, even though she claims her sister Mary is the narcissist. And all the characters that had nuances in the book do not have nuances in the movie. Anne Elliot, one of the few characters in the book that I would say contains more nuance, is also dumbed down to be a completely different individual. And yes, they make light of situations like her drinking or her screaming out Wentworth's name at a party and then jumping down so nobody sees her and then accidentally dumping possibly jam or wine on her head. I'm not sure. She's just so socially awkward. And it's not Anne from the book. So I could complain for a while about this movie, but I'm curious, have you watched it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Have you read Persuasion? I know that people who have not necessarily read Persuasion but saw the movie will have a very different opinion than I did, so I'm curious to know your thoughts. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and I see you all in the next video. Bye!